Okay, here's chapter 11 on conflict and negotiations. We're actually just going to cover the negotiations part of it. This is actually, I used to not like teaching this class, this topic, and now it's actually one of my favorite because I think it has a lot of practical applications. So we'll first talk about the different styles, the two different approaches, and then we'll go through, I think what's important is the steps to negotiation, individual difference that help or hinder negotiations, and the difference between men and women in negotiations and salary negotiation techniques. So like I said, I think it has practical application. The self-assessment for this week is to figure out your different styles of negotiation. So this is on Qualtrics, so complete that. I will give you your results. Once you have your results, use these slides to go through and figure out your styles. So your scores, if they're lower, you have a slight reliance on this versus a moderate or strong reliance. So figure out, what your style is. Here's the 5 different negotiation styles. So they are on 2 different spectrums, if you will. So how much do you cooperate and how assertive you are. So on cooperativeness, do you get along with others? Do you care about them? Or are you less cooperative, meaning that you have more of a self-focused? And assertiveness, do you stand up for what you want, or are you kind of the type of person who you're a pushover, or you let people walk over you, or you give people what they want? So if we put all these together, we have 5 different styles. So avoiding is basically you're low on cooperativeness and assertiveness. You're avoiding the situation. Sometimes that's a personality thing. This is basically you're not really standing up for yourself, but you're also not too interested in the other party. Competing is where you are not cooperative, but you are very assertive. So in other words, you care more about yourself than the other party. This is also known as aggression. So people who are aggressive are just that. They're not very cooperative. They're very forceful for what they want. At the other end of the spectrum, if you will, is accommodating. These people are very cooperative but are not assertive. This basically means that they care a lot about the other party, what they want, how they feel. These people really care more about others in the relationship more so than themselves, or at least they act that way. So I am very accommodating. I care about other people, what's important to them, the relationship, and so I tend to kind of make sure that others feel comfortable, that they're getting a fair share of the deal, and I'm not really assertive, and I don't really stand up for what I want or what would benefit me. So I tend to fall in this umbrella. Compromising and collaborative tend to be techniques where you're trying to figure out how both parties can win. So compromise is that you meet in the middle, right? You give some, I'll give some, and we'll both get some of what we want. Collaboration is one step further where we say, hey, how can we both win? How can we both get everything that we want? So let's think of an example. Say that you and I are going to go on a vacation, and I say, hey, I don't care where we go, I just want to go overseas. And you say, hey, I don't care where we go, I just want to go to a beach. Well, we might think about this, and I want to go overseas, you want to go to a beach, and you say, hey, let's go to Florida. And so maybe we go to Florida. In that situation, right, I'm losing because we don't get to go overseas. You get what you want, right? That's not an ideal situation. But what if we put our heads together and we said, hey, let's go to like Spain, right? There's some awesome beaches in Spain. So, and that way you get to go to a beach, I get to go overseas, we both win. So this is a situation where we work together to collaborate, right? We're both cooperative, we're both thinking about the other party, but we're also being assertive and saying, okay, this is what's important to me, this is what I want, and we're able to work together to come up with a situation where we both win. So that's the difference between collaborating and compromise. Compromise, we meet in the middle. We both don't get exactly what we want. We give and we take. Collaboration is where we both win and we get all of what we both want. Accommodating, you tend to lose, get walked over. Competing, you tend to walk over others, get what you want at the expense of others. And avoiding, you tend to just not engage in the negotiation much for yourself or for others. So you can go through all of these different ones. You can think about yourself, your score, reflect, and then think about how your negotiation style affects you, your life, and your relationships. The important thing to think about, and we're going to talk about that next, is that some of these right, are more applicable in some certain circumstances than others. So sometimes it's good to be competing. Sometimes it's good to be accommodating. Sometimes it's good to be avoiding. It really depends on the situation. So you can go through these, read through these, and figure out, when these types might be appropriate. So it says, is avoidance ever an appropriate strategy? Well, maybe, if under these certain circumstances. So you can think about these, think about when they might be appropriate, think about your main style and how that affects you. Right, so I said I'm accommodating, right? So this is the fact that I really care about others and the relationship between me and those other people. So I tend to take this, you win and I lose situation, which isn't ideal for me. Obviously it's not something I want, but it's also part of my personality. I care a lot about other people and our relationships. So I know this. So for me, when it comes to negotiations, I know because of this, I usually will take someone who's more of a different style with me if I have to negotiate. So, for example, buying a house or buying a car, right? I usually take Brent with me because he tends to have a different style that helps me so I don't basically get taken advantage of. My mom is great with negotiations, so she usually helps me. So again, know your style and think about how it affects you and what you can do to get the most out of negotiations. So kind of segueing into this, we're going to talk about the difference between two negotiation domains or approaches. So there's different negotiation domains, right? So we have distributive and integrative. So I'm going to explain them and then give an example to make sense of them. So with distributive, right, this is a negotiation that seeks to divide up a fixed amount of resources. Basically, you can think about a pie, right? If we're negotiating over this pie, right, the bigger piece I take, the less you get, right? So it's a fixed amount of resources. Integrative, right, this is basically where we can come together and create a win-win. So it's not a win-lose, right? The bigger pie I get, right, the less you get. It's not that. It's where basically we can come together to figure out how we both can maximize our wins. So this integrative situation would be like us again going on vacation. We have to pick a place, right? It's not a distributive. It's not like I win, you lose, or you win and I lose, right? We can figure out that, hey, this is an integrative type of negotiation. We both can win. We can both figure this out, right? If we take the time to listen to each other, trust each other, share information, we can figure out how we both can win, right? Distributive would be, say, for example, you go to buy a car, right? If you're going to buy a car and the dealer is saying, well, I want this much, right? The more they're asking, right, the more you have to pay. So the more they win and the less you win, right? The more you basically lose. So you want to the first thing you do when you negotiate is you figure out, well, what type of negotiation am I in? Because that's going to affect the strategies that you actually use, right? So if you think about, right, going to buy a car, right, you're probably going to maybe use a more aggressive strategy versus with an integrative situation, you're probably going to use something more like collaboration or compromise. So again, this table summarizes the differences with distributive, right? This is the pie. Think of, right, distributive as the pie. You want as much as possible of the pie. It's a win-lose situation, right? Your interests are opposed. You don't want to share a lot of information because the more you share, the more information you're giving the party to take advantage of and to use against you. The relationship tends to be short term, right? So if you go to buy a car from someone, you probably, depending on who you are, might not buy from them again, right? It's this one time done and done. Is that the expression? Type of negotiation, right? Whereas integrative, right? You both want to win, right? You both can win. So basically you have your interests are congruent. You want to share as much information so that you can learn from each other and figure out, oh, that's what's important to you. Oh, well, why don't we do this, right? So the more you share and work together and trust each other, the more you can both win. You build a long-term healthy relationship. So first thing you want to do in negotiations, figure out what type you're in, and that will help you figure out your strategy, right? Do I want to share information? Do I want to be honest? Should I be aggressive? Should I be a compromiser? Should I be collaborative? Right? That's your first thing that you have to do. So if you're in a distributive type of negotiation, right? So this is the pie example. You're negotiating over a house or over a car. Some tactics that you can use, right? One of the best things you can do is make the first offer and make it aggressive. So what this does is it shows power and it establishes an anchoring bias, right? So those with power are more likely to make initial offers, they speak first at meetings, and they win by this. So how this works is basically if you make the first aggressive and it's the first offer and it's an aggressive one, people focus on that information. So let's say that you're going out to buy a car and you see it there and it's kind of like the person's like, hey, what are you going to offer? Right? Make an aggressive first time offer. Be like, I'll give you $5,000 for that. Right? And then anything, even if they think it's ridiculous, that's the first number that everyone is now fixated on. Right? What if you had said, hey, like, I'll give you $7,000 for that? Well, now that's going to change the bargaining techniques, right? So if someone says 5,000, right? They're like, hey, I'll give you $5,000 for it. Well, now that's what they're kind of thinking. Well, I want more than that, right? But what if you had said like, oh, I want 7,000 more, right? It's changing the perspective of what it is. So make the first offer, make it an aggressive one, and you tend to do better. So here's the different stages to negotiation. These are just good to think about, and they seem obvious, but a lot of people miss them. So I'll go through and I'll explain some of these. So preparing and planning, right? So think about this. Some people go in and they don't have a plan, right? If you're going to go buy a car, right, make sure you have your BATNA, best alternative to negotiate an agreement. Basically, what this is anytime you go into a negotiation, have in mind a plan of what you're willing to pay if you're buying something or if you're selling something, the minimum amount you're willing to receive. Because if you go in and you don't have any type of idea of what you want to pay or what amount you want for something, you tend to lose. You tend to lose more money. So if you have some predefined number, you tend to stick more closely to that. So have that planning done. Assess the other party's goals, what their position might be, their counter offers, facts, figures, anything that you can think about to help best prepare. So if you go in with a plan like, hey, I'm going to offer 5,000, I know they're going to come back with 7, right? So then we can settle somewhere around 6. Like the more you have a plan, right, the more confident you're going to be, the more assertive you'll be, and the more the other party is going to be willing to kind of give into what you want. So have that planning. We already talked about the BATNA. Define the ground rules, right? How is this negotiation going to happen? Is it face to face? Are there time constraints? So I know personally, when I was given job offers, they were usually given via telephone, like, hey, we just want to offer you the job. Here's the money. Here's when you start. And that was helpful for me because I know my personality, right? I'm accommodating. I don't think well on my feet. I know my personality. So for me, just knowing how the negotiation was going to go down was helpful for me to, again, plan. So I knew that it was going to come via phone. So I knew that my strategy was to say, thank you very much for this offer. I'm really honored. I'm very pleased with this. I just want some time to think about this and talk to my family about this, and then I will get back to you. That was good for me because then I knew I could go back, think about the offer, ask other people for advice on how I should negotiate, and that's exactly what I did. So just knowing how the negotiation is going to go will help you figure out what to do, right? If I knew that I had to negotiate face to face, I know I can't do that alone because it's not in my personality. So like I said, when I went to go buy a car, I brought Brent with me because he's very good at knowing, like, hey, no, you need to be more assertive. So he actually took over and did the negotiations for me. And that's just helpful because I know I'm not good at that. I would get taken advantage of. So by him going with me, by knowing the ground rules, when and where the negotiation would take place, I was able to get a better deal on my car than had I done it myself. So there's no shame in asking for help, right? In life, especially in business, you should be doing that. You should know your strengths, your weaknesses, and take, I don't want to say advantage, but take advantage of the resources you have, right? So I know Brent has better negotiation skills than I do, so why not ask him for help, right? Those are some things that you should do. Clarification, justification, just make sure you understand everything that's going on. Bargaining, problem solving, this is actually where the negotiations happen, right? So when it came to my job offer, I went back to my faculty at Binghamton University where I was a grad student, and they were actually really helpful with us bargaining and figuring out how to negotiate. So I went back to my faculty at Binghamton and said, hey, here's what I was offered. And they told me, hey, based on the market, based off of our experience of how many years with understanding the market, of salaries, negotiations, prices, salaries, this is what you should counter with. And because of that, each job that I took, I was able to make, you know, a few extra $1,000 at all of my jobs that I've taken. So closure and implementation is your last step. This is basically where you want to make sure that you formalize it in some type of contract, writing, for example. Again, this seems obvious, but unless you have that in writing, right, it might be hard to implement whatever you negotiated on. So make sure you have those steps. Let's talk about, you know, what helps or hinders negotiation. So again, personality. So if you're an agreeable person, right, big five, trustworthy, forgiving, care about relationships, what other people think of you, do you think this helps or hinders you in a negotiation? So you can think about it. So what'd you come up with? Right, it's actually a help and a hindrance, right? So if you are in that distributive type of negotiation, right, the pie type, right, and you're a cooperative, compliant person, that's going to be a hindrance to you, right? Because basically you're probably going to be that agreeable, you care about other people, and you're probably going to get walked over a little bit. I score high in agreeableness, so I know when I'm going into those distributive type of negotiations, I don't do well. So again, I bring Brent. Thank you, Brent. But it can actually be a help. So because agreeable people are kind, they're warm, they're empathetic, they actually do well during those integrative type of negotiations. So again, see why it's important to figure out what type of negotiation you're in, because it's going to affect your strategy and what you do. So if you know you're in a distributive type, your personality is going to be difficult for you. So know that, and to figure out, you know, well, what do I do? Right? Bring someone who has a different type of personality to help you, or who has better negotiation skills. But if you're in an integrative type of negotiation where you have to find a solution, you have to care about the other party and your needs, your kind, warm, empathetic personality is actually going to be a help to you. What about extroversion? What do you think about them? This is an interesting one. A lot of people get this one wrong, but it actually can be a hindrance. Because what happens, especially in a distributive type of negotiation, extroverts, they talk, right? They talk a lot. And what happens when you talk? You give away information, right? When you give away information, this helps the other party use that against you, right? So the more you're talking, the more you're giving away information, and the more the other party can use that against you. So if you're an extrovert, right, be careful with this one, especially if you're in a distributive type of negotiation. Self-efficacy, this is a good predictor of success, because if you have that confidence, that's what self-efficacy is. You're confident, you're less likely to back down. You come across as intimidating, so you tend to do well, especially in those distributive type of negotiations. Okay, this is another thing I want to talk about, is the difference between men and women. So women tend to, on average, be higher on agreeableness, more accommodating. So they tend to behave in a less assertive, less self-interested way. So they tend to do not so well in distributive types of negotiation. When it comes to integrative, they tend to do well because they're very compassionate, right? It's that agreeableness part that helps them. They're less likely to initiate a negotiation, but if they do ask for an offer, they do negotiate first, they ask for less. They're more willing to accept an offer, and they make more generous offers to the other party. So again, we want to be careful with these things, especially with distributive type of negotiations. And in fact, this leads to an important idea. So in a survey, they asked, do you always negotiate for a salary following a job offer? Women say yes only 30% of the time versus men almost 50% of the time. So remember how we talk about the pay gap between men and women, right? One reason for that pay gap is because of this. So if you think about, hey, right, let's say a man and a woman were both offered $50,000 for the same job, right? Same salary, same job. Say the woman, right, doesn't negotiate. What's her starting salary? 50 grand. Say the male negotiates. $54,000. Right, already, right, starting off, are their pays equal? No. And why? Because the men's, right, they tend to negotiate more so than women. So we want to think about that, right? And again, that comes down to personality, probably culture, social, right, just our culture and our society, right? So this is really interesting because one study looked at this, and they found that male students took the step of negotiating their first offer 55% of the time, right, compared to only 4% for the female students. So in this study, they found that this resulted in about a 4,000 difference in starting salaries. We already reviewed this one. So this lack of negotiation can lead up to a $2 million difference in lifetime in terms of net worth or worth in terms of your, your income or what you're worth. So I thought that was crazy. $2 million over your lifetime, a difference between a man and a woman if they negotiate their salary. I thought there's no way that could be true. So, right, let's take our financial calculators. We're actually going to test this. So I actually tested this. So this is just, you can Google, this is a net present value, time value of money calculator. If you've taken finance, this should make sense. If not, no big deal. So basically, let's use this money. Let's say that we negotiate our salary and that we're making an extra $4,000 of difference a year. Let's assume that there's 35 years. So say you start this job at you're 25 and you work for 35 years. So you're 25, 35, 45, 55, you're 60 years old when you retire. Let's just make these assumptions. So basically for 35 years, you are making an extra $4,000 a year. Let's say that the interest rate, let's just put it as 12. That's kind of aggressive, but let's just make that assumption. So basically what this is saying is we plugged in all the values. Every year you're making an extra $4,000 a year. We're going to do this for 35 years. So basically you start working at 25, you work till you're 60, that's 35 years, and you're making about 12% off of this investment, so to speak. So I mean, this is pretty aggressive. I mean, if you're talking, I'm not going to get too much into finance, but if you're investing in like some type of bonds, you're making 2, 3, 4%. Right? This is pretty aggressive, but let's just assume it. So let's hit the calculate button. Here's your future value, $1.7 million, just under those simple assumptions. So basically this slide here that says if you don't negotiate, or if you do negotiate the extra $4,000 a year, and if you invest it under the assumptions that for 35 years you're making 12%, that is almost $2 million over your lifetime, that 35 years, that you will be making extra. So basically if you negotiate an extra $4,000 a year and you invest that, right, by the time you retire at 35 years old, that's what you're going to have just from that investment alone. Now, of course, these are assumptions that are being made. So I mean, you can use this link down. It basically shows you how this works, right? $4,000 you're investing, then next year another 4, so you're up to 8,000. Here's the interest that you're making, right? This column here. So if you add all this up, this is what you're making. All of the $4,000 that you add each year plus all the interest, right? If you look at the starting balance column, right, you just keep scrolling down, right? You can see, right, what you do, the interest that you make, and how much you end up with. So yeah, negotiating is significantly important and can have a huge effect on your life. So when the salaries that I negotiated, right, I just invest all that money. That extra, a few $1,000s a year, right, is just going to add up for when I retire. So if there's anything you take from this class, please negotiate your salary and then take that and invest it. If you're like, Kristen, I don't know how to invest, right, you can ask your organization, right, if they have an HR department, hey, for my 401k or 403b, whatever you have, how do I invest this? And, they should be able to help you with that. If not, there's a lot of companies out there like Vanguard, that can help you. If you have friends to help you, I think that's really important. I think if the one thing that if you realize this is over 35 years, so the sooner you start investing, the bigger effect it will have. So don't think that I'll negotiate, but I'll start investing when I'm like 30 or 35. No, start as soon as possible. It will make a huge difference in your life, I promise. So seriously, anything you take away from this class, this is it. Okay, some other negotiation techniques real quick. This is the last thing we'll cover. Never accept your offer without negotiating your salary, just like you'd never go to an interview without a resume, right? A lot of people say like, oh, like you can't negotiate, right? That's almost always, BS. It's not true. Salaries are almost always negotiable. Silence is power. You need to stop selling against yourself. Remember, the extroverts, they talk a lot, they give information away. Just say what you have to say and then be quiet, right? Let the other party say something. And I know this is uncomfortable because sometimes, like, when no one's talking, it's uncomfortable and you just want to say something to break that silence. Make it uncomfortable for the other party. I know that sounds rude, but right, sometimes you have to do what's best for you. Let's see, be prepared. Back up your arguments with facts and support, right? A lot of information on salaries is available on salary.com, PayScale, Glassdoor, especially even if you have a job and you're looking for, a pay raise. It's okay to ask, especially if you think that you've been doing a good job, but come prepared, hey, these are what other people are making. This is what I think I deserve. It's okay to negotiate. A lot of people I think are worried that, hey, if I negotiate, if I ask for more, right, they're going to say no, or they're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm greedy. That's not always the case. And in fact, some people are actually anticipating that you're going to ask for a pay raise, if you're not getting one. So those are some things to think about. I think that the key takeaways, right, know your negotiation style and how it affects you and what you can do about it. If you know you're not a good negotiator, right? Plan for these things, right? Like I said, I bring Brent. When it came to negotiating my salary, I was lucky to have experts who helped me. So again, if you're not sure, right, ask maybe your professors what to do, other people in the field, or maybe if you know your parents or people, friends of your parents who know your industry who would help you negotiate. If you're in a distributive type of negotiation, right, that's the pie. Make the first offer, make it aggressive. And seriously, key takeaway, not just for this chapter, but for the semester, please try to negotiate your salary. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know.